All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mindgasms podcast. I'm going to get to talk with Parker Evans again today. I haven't talked for a long time, so it'll be exciting. We're going to, the tentative plan is to discuss issues like psychedelics and how they have helped both of us and how they could help the culture right now, and also all the wokeness and political tribalism that's going around right now, and perhaps some links between those issues, as you were just alluding to before we started this. So yeah, so wherever you want to start off is cool, man. I know we haven't talked in a long time, so I guess for people who don't know you, we connected through the Mixed Mental Arts Facebook group originally, right?
Correct. Yeah. It was kind of a mutual kind of respect, kind of seeing the things that you were posting. And I believe that, I mean, I don't post nearly as often as I did in that forum now, but I mean, I did see a lot of interesting banter coming from your end, a lot of interesting ideas. And I was actually very interested in having a conversation with you. And I thought it was very enlightening when we had a conversation last. So I'm excited to have another one with you. So thank you for allowing me back on.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Yeah, I had a great conversation with you last time too. And I'm excited to talk again. So I guess we start off by we were talking about psychedelics before, and you were telling me about how you had kind of a transformational experience recently, and I've had some experiences like that before. So you want to start off with just talking a little bit about how that helped you recently?
Yeah, it all kind of sparked from the recent craziness with the pandemic and everything. And I was actually going through an interesting time. It was what I like to call it, a challenge of existence. I had a lot of challenges that were coming all at once. So I actually got laid off at the same time. I had a relationship that was ending at the same time. I had a brother that was also going through a lot of legal trouble at the same time. I was going through a lot of drama within my own family. And it seemed like it was very big at the time. And I remember actually with our last conversation, we were talking about Jordan Peterson, who, was also a native neighbor to the north, such as yourself. And he actually had talked about the hero's journey. And he had talked about how just to be a better person, not just necessarily a better man, although I was going at it to be a better man and face the challenges that life was giving me, you had to essentially, the Pinocchio story, which was go against the whale and kind of save your father, i.e. yourself and your wisdom and what you know about this world, and also the exploration that goes along with it. And I was like, well, what's this final piece that I need to like put this together? Because it seems like just life is just very hard. And I had actually looked at different answers, and I'd always been interested in the Joe Rogan experience. And he had a gentleman by the name of Paul Stamets on there. And I remember
mushroom guy. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. He had Paul Stamets on there, and he was a mycologist. And I've always had, originally I had gone into school. I'm a biomedical engineer by trade or by my degree, but I had gone to school originally for biology, and I always found mycology to be quite fascinating because it was like kind of that, I felt like it was that weird space between eukaryotic cells and plant cells. And you have this weird kind of combination of the two within mycelium and just within mushrooms and just that entire thing. And I was like, there's got to be some reason why this is still around and why that was almost like the first multi-celled organism that ever existed on Earth at all. So I was kind of apprehensive, and I live in Denver, full disclosure. So here they've decriminalized psychedelic mushrooms.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yes, they've decriminalized it in Denver. So I was like, you know what? If we can do anything here, we've got all of the things we need. We've got a challenge that's facing me in life. We have access to a a very powerful kind of transformative, frame changing, I guess, medium that I would say. And I was like, what can you do with this? And I was like, of all times, is the time to take the hero's journey. So I took what was considered to be a hero's dose, which is about 7 grams of psychedelic. And I went on what I believe was going to be a 3-hour long hike. I actually ended up listening to this very in-depth book on tape that kind of changed up my whole outlook on things. It was like a mixture of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life. And then I also had like this book called The Rational Male, which was like part of this red pill thing, which I don't necessarily feed 100% into, but at the same time, it was something that I needed just because I felt like, I mean, this was on Father's Day. So it was kind of like more of a all male, just regaining your framework and regaining control of your life again. So I was doing this walk and I'm like, I'm having this amazing thing. Like, and I knew I was feeling things because this hike was, like I said, supposed to be about 3 hours. About a half hour in, trees start talking to me and they're like, yo, man, you're doing great. And life, you're one with the earth, man. And I'm like, yo, trees, I don't know why, but like, you've never said shit to me before, but I'm not going to question it, man. You guys are dope. So,
yeah, that's the right attitude to have with psychedelics too, to just accept what's happening. Because if you fight it, then that's how a bad trip can start, right?
Yeah, I actually ended up sharing some with my father, and he had a completely different trip because he has these really, really tightly held thought patterns that he's even a little afraid of ever breaking. And when I saw that, it's kind of like, I love the fact that I kind of saw that because it told me that it was like, sometimes it's okay to relinquish. It's like a roller coaster ride. Just let yourself go on the ride. Yeah. And then eventually it will be over, but just know it's just a ride. And that reality itself is kind of a ride. And it's, you can enjoy it or you can sit there and you can be victim to all the things that happen, but things are always going to be happening. And what I like, so I'm on this trip and I meant to tell you everything. So it actually turned out to be kind of a bad trip at first because it was actually at a public park and I'm like, all right, well, I'm thinking this hike is going to take 3 hours. I finished it in about like an hour and a half. So I haven't even peaked. Like, note, I've taken 7 grams. So I'm like feeling things, but I'm not peaking out. And for anybody that hasn't done psychedelics before, your peak is essentially where you begin to have your neural pathways, you feel them extra hard. And when I say feel them extra hard, I mean whatever kind of subconscious, because your mind is always your mind, but sometimes you can bury things and you have to come to terms with whatever's going on in your mind. So if anybody decides to, after watching this, go on a psychedelic experience, I would suggest that you practice meditation for at least a week. Do some fasting, make sure that you have a good diet and everything. I mean, I did everything that you possibly could do to take the most out of this, have a healthy lifestyle, drink a lot of water, and you'll get the best out of it. But even with that, if you take a hero's dosage, meaning you take about at least 5 grams or above of psychedelic mushrooms, you'll still have things, even if you are basically a good person. You'll have to come to terms with a lot of things that are going on in your mind. So I'm starting to have the realization that this is going to happen. So I'm starting to peak. And as this is happening, I'm like, there's families around. This isn't going to be good. I can't be in this park anymore. So I make, and just know, like, kids don't do this at home. I made a bad decision. There was a cop that was around there, and I'm like, look, I can't trip as bad of balls as I know I'm going to trip in this park. So I actually got in my car, and I remember it was bad because I remember I saw my car and I recognized that it was my car, but my car had never looked that beautiful before. I'd never seen it in that kind of shape. I was like, it's so geometrically perfect. This is the most beautiful vehicle I've ever experienced. Yeah. And how did I ever even have enough money to even get something that was so beautifully engineered? I remember thinking all of that. And if you've never experienced absolute total bliss with whatever's going on in your life, psychedelics can take you there. So I remember I actually did make the bad decision of getting in my car. I actually drove down the street like just a little bit. It was like next to a highway, and I was doing just well enough to like not anybody. And then I like turn off, and I'm like, if you're gonna trip balls, man, you got to do it in a residential neighborhood where nobody's gonna really think much of it. So I like, and I mean, I did all of the precautions. I pull over to the side, like I'm out of the way, like nobody would even know that anything's going on. The only thing that sucks is it's the hottest day of like the year. This is like the middle of June, and it was like 90 degrees.
Holy
so shit. Yeah. And then on top of that, I don't know if you know what the psychedelic sweats are. Have you ever had them?
I don't think I have, no.
Like when you take a certain amount of psychedelics, like your body starts violently rejecting it, going like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I'm like I'm already sweating from having like just the sheer volume of just thoughts. And I remember it was like even a light hurt because it was just, everything was just started becoming very intense. So I pull over to this place. I'll never forget the street. It was 26th and Robinson, and I'll never forget it. I pull over, and I decide that I'm going to like essentially have my trip, full balls of the wall trip. And I get out of my front seat of my car because I don't want, if anybody calls the cops, because I'm tripping that hard, I'm like, if anybody calls the cops, they're going to think I'm trying to like drive away. So I get in the back seat of my car, and I just, no AC, just let myself just have this trip. And I mean, I'm going through everything. I'm talking about my childhood. I'm talking about all the traumas that I had. And it's like, people say that you need therapy, and I believe everybody should explore therapy, but like, just imagine 4 or 5 years worth of therapy just truncated into like maybe 5 or 6 hours. And I was experiencing the start of that in the backseat of this car. And I was like going through, and I'm like, I'm crying and everything. And it was bad. I remember it was so bad that it was Father's Day weekend, and I actually called my dad on having this trip. And I'm like, hey man, I don't know where you're at, and I know that I'm like in my 30s, but I really need you to come and get me right now because I think it's going to be good. So like I said, I was going through this breakup, and I'm like, why did you ever let this woman be like in your life? And then I was also like going down the lines of like, well, it's probably because of your mother. And then it's like, I start thinking about my mother. And then I'm like, oh, well, you know, the whole reason why you feel this way about your mother is because you had this trauma, and there was this abandonment thing. And there was like, you have to go through, and whatever you have, you basically in that moment have to deal. And your mind always has the tools to deal. You just don't ever really have the quote unquote time to deal with it. And because time is a perception of the mind, time slows down, it speeds up, and it does it all at the same time for what it needs to. And it kind of gives you this whole thing. I remember very vividly, Joe Rogan had this line that kind of summed it up. It was like, the best part about doing psychedelics is the fact that you realize that reality is bullshit, and that it's all a game. It's all a game. It really is. It's all a game. It has different rules, and we put different shit on top of it, but you can have as much fun with it as you want. And especially being in the Western world, a lot of people don't appreciate the fact that you have free speech. You can do whatever you want. And this is what you can do whatever you want here. And it's amazing. You have so many freedoms, and it kind of lets you realize just that kind of thing, because you dissolve your ego. So I'm going through this ego dissolving. I'm in the backseat of this car, and I'm like having all of these just really vivid, striking thoughts. And eventually and I remember hard because I was tripping so hard. I was like, I can't drive this car. There's no way I can drive this car. I actually ended up leaving the car there, and my father picked me up, and, you know, we had like this long, intense, like loving hug. And like for guys, especially, and I hate to bring it up, but I mean, eventually we're going to talk about it anyway, but especially for Black guys, it is not a cool thing to be that emotionally vulnerable and like be okay with it. And I just remember being like, yeah, I know that I shouldn't, quote unquote, be okay with this, but I am. And I was like, yo, man, like, there's nothing wrong with showing love for my father. Like, he was like a little scared for me. And he was like, you're going through a lot, man. So he didn't even know I was tripping on mushrooms. He just thought I was going through an emotional breakdown. So I remember getting back home, and then, he's like, yo, just lay down in your bed. And I'm like, and this is my childhood home. So I'd actually gone back on this weekend to, actually it was Colorado Springs. And then I come up to Denver and everything. And then, my dad had kind of laid me down when I was in my familial home around the Denver area too. And he had like put me down and given me some water and everything. And I remember looking up at the ceiling fan. And this was when I was like, this is amazing. This is because I like had an emotional breakdown. And usually when people have those, like, you feel bad, but I felt great. And I looked up at the ceiling fan, and it wasn't my ceiling fan anymore. Like, no, this is my childhood room. It turned into like this big cell. Like,
go back for a second. So the emotional breakdown, did it feel like cleansing, and that's why it made you feel good?
Yes. It was one of those things where it's like, during the time I was like, why is this so hard? And it's like, this is just your mind, man. You're in control of that. And when you have that objectivity, and it's almost like having a passenger. It's almost like having a better version of yourself talk to yourself, because you do have that ego dissolving. I think a lot of people put a lot of things and think you're supposed to think something. You're supposed to have some kind of outcome. And that's what causes a lot of people a lot of pain, because you think that your reality is supposed to be a certain way. And psychedelics, particularly mushrooms, LSD, I don't think does it as much, but psychedelic mushrooms, mainly probably because it's more of an earthy kind of thing, allows you to break off that layer of reality to kind of like, I guess, better evaluate why you're feeling a certain way. And it's almost like having an extra voice that goes like, I'm sad. And then instead of just feeling sadness, you think about your sadness in a very objective way. Like, well, what would make you sad? What are the thought patterns that you have? And then you start thinking about, that's why you go deep, because you go deeper into your childhood. Like, why does this particular thing make me mad? Why does this particular thing make me uncomfortable? And having to actually deal with that, it almost forces a depth of the entire experience of being a human being, because when you have to explore that within yourself, you realize that that's something that you can explore within other people too. And that's a powerful thing. Yeah. When you realize that you have that many layers, I don't look at people as people anymore. I look at them as a child that grew up and they're very layered, and they got different layers as ages went on. And it's almost like the oak tree, except those layers can also be related to emotionality. So when I see very old people that are angry, I'm like, dude, that's a lot of years of pain. And I don't know what happened, but it was compounded. And then it almost feels like, what I loved about the psychedelic experience was it felt like being a child again and having that curiosity. And you repair all of those things that made you afraid of being who you truly were. And think about the time when you were the most charming in your life. You were the most charming when you were a child, because you genuinely wanted the best out of life. You didn't care about colors. You didn't care about, political things. You didn't care about it. It broke everything down to a root. It just broke everything down to, this might be BS, but we forget that a lot of what we live is BS, and that we're living by patterns that other people have instilled in us, and things don't necessarily have to be as heavy as we make them to be. And I realized that when I even looked at my ceiling fan, and like I said, the ceiling fan that I had in my childhood room forever, it became like this entity. And I remember it had like a light bulb in it. Those new light bulbs that are like kind of spirally, and they are highly energy efficient. I was looking up at this because it was a ceiling fan. It had like one of those light bulbs in the middle, and sometimes they have those bulbs, but the bulb was missing. So it was just a bare naked bulb. And I remember looking at it, and because of the way the light was, like, I had turned the light off, but you could still see the light bulb. And I was watching the ceiling fan propeller go around, and it became like this weird kind of like viscous kind of, it looked like a cell. It looked like a cell. And I remember looking at the light bulb and it became like tentacles. And then like the two like different kind of controlling mechanisms, the two chains that you pull to control, the light and also the speed of the propeller for the ceiling fan, those also became tentacles. And they were like reaching out to me. And then like this thing was talking to me. And it was like, I've been here this entire time and you've been sad since you were a child, Park. And like, it was the personification of something that I felt even since my childhood, because I was back in my childhood room. And even though this experience I even know now wasn't real, even while it was happening. And that's why I enjoy mushrooms, because mushrooms, you're tripping, but you kind of have what I like to call the anchor of reality. So it's not like you leave so far that it's like, oh God. And I think that's what a lot of people's misconception is about psychedelics, where it's like, I don't want to lose all control. And I'm like, you don't lose all control. It just changes the perception of what you already see. And it's something that your mind might have already done, but you don't have so many layers of things in front of you. And it's almost like being full imagination. So you might imagine something, but whatever you're seeing, and a lot of people see like demons or whatever, it's like, dude, you see that anyway. You just don't acknowledge the fact that that's what you see.
Yeah.
Now it's being forced to be there. It's kind of like people that like smoke weed and then they're like, oh, I'm anxious when I smoke weed. I'm like, dude, you're just an anxious person.
Yeah.
Weed just releases that layer of your BS, your ego, that tells you that you shouldn't be and like tempts that down, but that's just the way that you are. And I think that's why a lot of people are afraid of just, especially the softer drugs. Like, I don't really consider psychedelic mushrooms to be a drug like that. It just grows like that. You just eat it after it's dried. It's not like anybody did anything. I don't really consider DMT to be a drug. Like, your body and things on this earth naturally produce it. It's an expanding experience. And I believe that there's a lot of governments that probably don't want you to have that, just because you go, oh, this is all bullshit. And then you won't show up to work anymore. So, that's why I feel that there's a lot of restraints. And then, of course, like heroin, I don't think anybody's going to get any better doing heroin. So there are certain things, but, having that experience and having the totality of knowing that your mind can do literally anything. It can change your entire perception of this world. It was very powerful to me. And it was very powerful because I came out of something that was hard, like almost better than I had when I had entered that hard moment. And that's very hard for people to imagine, to come out better at the end of a challenge than you were at the beginning of it. And I completely owe that all to the psychedelic experience that I had, and, laying down. And then I remember going to sleep after seeing this alien-like thing. And then I just remember waking up the next day and I still felt what I like to call is the vapors of the experience. So it's like, you're a little lightheaded, you're lighter than you were before, but you're okay. And I had like an awesome, and I just remember thinking about like just signs of how awesome the experience was the next day. And signs were like, we went to McDonald's and we got like an extra hash brown with our egg McMuffins, that kind of thing. And it's like, it's little, but you're like, yo, man, that had to be an awesome experience. I got an extra hash brown. And like, I had like some of the deepest conversations with any of my friends because I had a level of vulnerability that I didn't care about having with them. Sometimes there's this whole machismo and I want my friends to think a certain thing about me, this, that, and the other thing. I didn't care about any of that. All I wanted was, I was like, look, this is an incredible experience. I want to make sure that before I leave this earth, that I make the most out of all my days. And I can honestly say that happened due to that psychedelic experience.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Like, like for example, that reminds me what you just said at the end there of the first time I've eaten mushrooms 3 times, and I remember I'd say the first time was probably the most like transformative and effective for me. And I remember like after I ate the mushrooms, it had like like you were talking about, I had those sort of vapors after, and like to the point where, as you were talking about, like how you just appreciate all aspects of life so much more, and it sort of removes that layer of like giving a shit about other people's impressions of you so much that, like, I remember it was probably for like a year after I ate them, every day I felt like, man, I know some things are going bad, but today's a pretty awesome day. And I would like hug everyone when I saw them and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I remember too, when like when I ate mushrooms too, it was like I ate them with my best friend at the time, and we were having like the most deep and meaningful conversations ever, like you were talking about. And that happened the second time too, when I ate them with one of my really good friends, who's been my friends for years. We had like such a deep emotional connection, and that's one of the things too, that you made me think about, like when you were talking about weed and how it seems to make some people anxious, but that's like just how you are as a person. And in like a similar way, I think weed, especially for me, but for a lot of people, it kind of like removes this, like you were saying, it removes like this caring about bullshit about about wanting other people to have the right perceptions of you. It, to me, it makes me open up more with people, and it makes me more comfortable with talking too, because I'm actually naturally pretty introverted. So like, especially when I first started my YouTube channel, I was really nervous, and I was stuttering all the time, and I didn't have that much emotion in my voice. But I've like, weed helps with that, and obviously like that in combination with
Mm-hmm.
practicing a hell of a lot with talking with people helps make it feel a lot more natural.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's the human experience is made to have connection. And I think a lot of these, well, for lack of a better word, drugs, um, they allow you to have that connection. It's almost like a level up of being able to relate to people. It's a level up on being able to relate to yourself, which I think ultimately, because you're able to relate to yourself better, you're able to relate to people better.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like you were saying, it's like you were saying how you can see um, people, like you see them as the collection of what happened to them in their lives and how it's influenced them. Like how you were talking about how if you see like an older grumpy person, you think, wow, that's a lot, like that's a lot of years of pain that has influenced that.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is you don't realize that that's a lot of years of pain on them until you acknowledge the pain within yourself, and you're like, okay, the reason why I was mad was because, if you genuinely have a sense of peace, you realize that anger is just it's an anchor. It's nothing that will ever help you out. One of the comic books that I've like absolutely loved, like I'm a Marvel dude, but DC did a really good job with Green Lantern. And Green Lantern, I constantly think about this concept. They made a bunch of other rings on top of the Green Lantern ring. So then, like, they have a red ring, and that's like that's supposed to be anger. Then they have like a yellow ring, and that's supposed to be like fear. I think there's like an orange ring, and that's avarice. But they had all of these things that were supposed to be about like the human condition. And there's a lot of people that have the red ring because you have to have anger to have it, but it's the weakest of the rings.
Oh, cool.
The most powerful of the rings is the blue ring. And do you know what the blue ring is supposed to represent?
Love.
No, hope.
Oh, yeah, just as
But
good.
this is what I loved about the comic though. The blue ring is without any power unless there's a green ring around. So do you know what the green ring is supposed to represent?
No.
Willpower and fortitude. If you don't have the willpower and fortitude to put together what you hope for, your hope means nothing.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
And having the psychedelic experience kind of let me have, I had already appreciated that storyline, but I didn't appreciate how deeply emotionally intelligent you had to be to even come up with that concept.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a spiritual concept really too. Like it's how it's kind of related to how taking psychedelics is spiritual experience too. And that's one thing I just remembered that I thought about when you were talking there about how, you know, they call taking psychedelic drugs a trip for a reason. Like, you're gonna go through something and have like a really meaningful and sometimes challenging and definitely profound experience, and then you immerse yourself in the experience, and then when you come out of it, you feel just like this overwhelming feeling of bliss. And it just like you said, it affects it affects not only your perceptions of reality, but your perceptions of how you see and interact with other people.
And the most profound thing, I believe, comes down to the fact that all of it was in your mind in the first place. The most interesting thing about psychedelics is nothing that you see is something that you couldn't have fathomed, because essentially you're fathoming everything. It's an increase of connections within your mind. A lot of people think that it's some kind of like, it takes you, and it's like, no drug really takes you. Like, that's something that I get a little irritated when people go like, well, what if you get lost in this? Like, you'll get lost in whatever it is you want to get lost in, if your whole point is to get lost. Like, a lot of people think that, for instance, marijuana. I had a conversation with somebody the other day about how marijuana was a quote unquote gateway drug. I'm like, look, if you're looking for something out of drugs, if you're looking for something out of the experience, you will find that experience. It might not be with weed. Like, if you're somebody that really wants to escape life because you have a hard life, like, heroin is the perfect one. But weed does kind of give you the vapors of kind of feeling that way. But if you want to have that full, I don't want to be here anymore kind of experience, you can go with crystal meth, you can go with heroin, you can go with all these other things.
And you can use weed for that too. Like, that's a thing about drugs, I think. Like, it depends on what you use them for. If you're using them to escape reality, then that's like a bad relationship with the drug. If you use it to enhance reality, then that's a good relationship with it, in my opinion.
Correct. I mean, I know some people that have a relationship with weed, but like, all I do is I don't even use it to party. I sleep. I just smoke weed, then I go to sleep, and that's it. And, I'm like, hey, that's great. They're like, I don't have to do anything else. I don't have to get a prescription. I don't have to get anything. And as far as psychedelics go, I know a lot of people, and I can say from my own experience, that have had very traumatic experiences that have ranged from serious trauma. I'm talking about all the way up to, like, I was molested, something like that, down to, I've just gone through something that might be slightly hard, and they've all gotten through, or if not completely gotten through, they've gotten to a point of at least acceptance with it, or thought about it more. Because I know that even people that have bad trips, my father actually had a bad trip, and he came out of it, but he was more thoughtful about the reason why he had it, because it's all something that you came up with in your mind. You've got to think of it as, I'm in the tech industry, so you can have an application, but essentially your kernel, like, that's what allocates all of your different resources that are on your hardware to whatever your software is. So you've got to essentially think of your psychedelic experience being a new kernel. You always have those resources. It just loads them up differently into the front range of your mind. So you've always been processing things the same way. All of a sudden, you've got a whole new operating system that comes in. Same resources. You still have the same brain. It just uses it differently than it used to before.
Yeah, that's like that reminds me of the metaphor that I've heard Joe Rogan use before for psychedelics. It's like you're still. It's like it gives you new software for you to experience reality with. So you're not running on the same programs. You like throw out all those old programs, and that you reprogram yourself in a way.
I think of it as just a software upgrade, a pack. Like it's adding new features. It's adding new
Yeah.
features to what you already had, and it's the best part about it is you didn't have to buy a whole new computer. You didn't have to get a whole new brain. You didn't have to learn a whole lot. You just had to think differently about what you did know.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's
Definitely.
what stops a lot of people, and I think that's what kind of is leading a lot of people to being stuck in ideological loops, not thinking that there's only one way that you can think about something. And if somebody thinks differently, then that's a direct affront to the way that you think about something. And that's
Textbook naive realism.
correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like one of the themes there, I think, is that like psychedelics and weed and lots of other things too, like you talked about meditation as well. Like these are all really introspective things. And like you were just saying there, if you're not introspective, or especially if you're afraid of being introspective, which could be one of the fears of psychedelics, then you're not examining your worldview to the extent that you could be examining it, and maybe you're just basically setting a trap for yourself to be stuck in your ideology. And like you were saying, you might think that, well, the way I think about this is the only correct way to think about it, and if you disagree with me about it, then that makes you a bad person.
Yeah. And I think we've gotten to a point, speaking of Joe Rogan again, we've gotten to a point in society now where I think belief has gotten so ingrained as far as political belief that people are kind of having that as their new religion. And I believe having the psychedelic experience let me at least have that detachment and not necessarily think about us all as being in this big thing of I have to have my side win. Otherwise, like chaos, it takes you out of the whole thing and goes like, if I was somebody that was not even a person, if I was an alien that was on a whole different planet, I saw the way we were interacting, and I was like, hey, everybody kind of looks the same, like they're bipedal, everybody's thinking, and everybody has these problems, and nobody's happy. And instead of sitting there and getting together and going like, yeah, you look at things differently, but how can I help you with your happiness? And how can you help me with my happiness? And how can we all essentially help each other get to what our best version of happiness is within the frame that we're in? We make a lot of focus on how to essentially change everybody to think the way that we do so that our version of happiness is everybody's version of happiness. And that seems right in the first way. But then when you think about it, that's like almost like what, some of the worst people in history have thought of doing things. Like if you look at, of course, everybody uses Hitler. He seemed like he was a good dude at first. But the thing is that even though he was saving Germany and he was, saying, we're not going to pay any of these stupid war taxes, and we're going to take back all of the old German cities and everything like that. Essentially, he made it so people thought that they had nothing else left to do except to think of the rest of the world as the other. And he did it in this way where it's like, I know you're desperate, but I'm giving you a way out of this desperation. And there were other people that were like, hey, the way that this dude's proposing us get out of this best desperation is going to lead you to calamity. But people wanted that. People were so hurt that they needed that. They wanted to feel important again. They wanted to feel like the world took notice, and they knew that they couldn't be treated that way again. So when you look at that, it's kind of like, it looks a little bit like the woke culture now. Everybody
Yeah.
needs to know how bad we have it, just like all of the Nazis needed to let the whole world know this is how bad you guys treated us, and we
Yeah.
have a right to do what we're doing. We have the absolute right because you took so much from us. And when you get caught up in that self-righteous thing and you don't have the objectivity to go like, the people I'm going against, they have their own shit too. I don't know what that shit is, but I have to have an appreciation for the fact that they do have it. And
Yep.
what we're doing now is we're like, it's our neighbor. This is, whether you're in Canada now, or you're in the United States, everybody that's doing whatever you're doing the Black Lives Matter protests, whatever, we're all in this together. But there's few people that look at that and they go, this is chaotic and I really need to take advantage of this. And we don't see the humanity in the other side, because a lot of us as people are susceptible to having somebody, I guess, righteously tell us that we were not only wronged, but we need to have that wrong righted, because that feels a little powerful too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like, righteous indignation is a very, like, it feels good when you feel that way, because you feel like I am justified in being this angry. And like you were saying about Hitler there, like, one of those tactics that he used is uniting the people against a common enemy, which is what always happens with ideologues in like any political worldview, especially a lot lately. Like, we all think the same way. Those other people, they are bad people. Let's unite against them and share our righteous anger so we can take down these bad people.
Oh yeah, and the thing is there's always somebody that's a little angry. That's why I get a little upset, and that's why I thought that even the analogy that they had with the Green Lantern, there's so many. Everybody can get a red ring. The thing is anger's the easiest of all of the emotions to have, because it's like, look, I don't have to think about anything. All I know is I'm angry, and something, I don't know what it is, whether right or wrong, needs to happen. And I'm going to make that happen, so I'm not angry anymore. And people feed into that. As far as having a psychedelic experience goes, it lets you know that that's all BS. And why would you have anybody to fight with in the first place? Also, I think it lets you realize that maybe having a centralized religion or something like that isn't so bad, because when we at least were more religious as a country, I believe here in the United States, and probably just anywhere that has a centralizing religion, it's a little easier to unite behind something other than politics. Because you're like, well, yeah, maybe you're a Democrat, maybe you're Republican, but at the end of the day, we're all going to go see God. So who cares? So it doesn't seem like all of this is as, I guess, raw and against you. But at the same time, it's like, if you go with religion, then there's going to be something that goes like, well, ultimately somebody believes in something different than I do, so I think that's bad. So we're really good at finding ways to separate ourselves. I've just noticed that, just as people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like what you were talking about there, it kind of goes back to Nietzsche, what Nietzsche said about the death of God, basically, which he sort of meant as a metaphor for the declining role of religion in society. And it kind of seems like that was prophetic, especially today. Like, people are basically getting religious about their political worldviews. And I appreciate that point you made at the end there too, because it's hard to find a solution, because like, religion is a very good, like to go back to Jonathan Haidt, who we've talked about before. One of the and I've talked about this on my channel so many times, but one of the reasons that I stopped being a militant atheist is because I learned through mixed mental arts from people like Jonathan Haidt and David Sloan Wilson about cultural evolution and group selection, and how it seems like religion was selected through group selection because it helps create more effective groups. And so that's why, like, I stopped being militant about my atheism, because I figured, well, it's natural for people to be religious. And then I developed a better understanding about how religion is very useful for people and it helps a lot of people. And then, but to go back to the point that you made at the end there, like, religion isn't necessarily for everyone, and not everyone is going to have the same religion, and people should be allowed to have, say, different religions in the different culture. So it's hard to think of like a good solution, like I was saying, because like, what do you like? How do you unite everyone in a culture over something? You can do it with a religion, but and maybe that'll work. Maybe that is the solution. But which religion is it? There's going to be disagreement over what religion. Over what religion it is, or if it's not a religion, what other sort of political worldview or any other sort of worldview it is. Like, it's so hard to figure out how to solve this sort of problem, or even if it can be solved.
And the thing that made me think about religion the most actually was actually Jordan Peterson, and he had said, you know, like, when it comes down to it, I was the same way. Mill's an atheist, but when it comes down to it, you can't disrespect something that's been around for thousands of years. It's resonated with so many generations. Like, think about how long that is, how many people that is. That's at least 10 people long. You know what I mean? If you said people lived like 100 years apiece, it's 10 people long. Like, think about how many generations had to go and deal and endure what the Bible or whatever religion that you're thinking about, and why they did it for that long. What was the purpose behind that? And why is it that there's certain concepts that are always a little bit along the lines with every religion? And I think it ultimately comes down to, we as people are prone to making very bad mistakes about the intention of our fellow man. We're bad at making mistakes as far as just having a natural barometer on which way to go to have the maximum amount of good for all humanity, not just ourselves or what we deem to be what needs to be snuffed out of society. Because that's a big thing. A lot of people think that they know what needs to be snuffed out, but very few people think about what they can do individually to add, or what kind of example they want to show for other people to follow. So when it comes down to it, I'd say that religion is something that I don't know what the new quote unquote religion needs to be, but we need a new centralizing kind of thought. And I'm thinking maybe a psychedelic trip that is maybe mandated at like 21 or something like that might do. It's like, look, man, you're starting to pay taxes and shit. It's time to unplug, man. Like, stop with BS. But then, you know, nobody would like vote, and then people would go like, oh, I don't fucking care about that system. That seems stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like it makes me sad sometimes when I see and you see a lot of people, like when you go out in the world and just interact with the average person, or even people with you work with, or anyone like that. There's so many people who are grown adults, and many people who are much older and have had much more life experience than me, who just clearly live totally unexamined lives and just go off their instinctive emotional responses all the time, and they have all these problems. And part of what helps me see that is psychedelics, for sure. And it's also that, like, this is a human thing that I've had a history of my own emotional problems too. Like, I've had depression for a long time. I used to have a serious anger problem, so I spent years developing like these habits to help me deal with my emotions and examine them and deal with them in a healthier way. Like, I do all these things, like I make sure I work out all the time, I meditate, and all kinds of stuff like that, so I can avoid being like an angry and depressed person all the time.
And I think that's something else that psychedelics kind of helps you out with, is when you are angry and depressed, a lot of people kind of just feel those emotions, and then they become a slave to them without really questioning, well, why am I angry and depressed? And a lot of the reason why you don't feel like you're happy, or you might have that feeling of what we call anger or depression, is your feeling of hopelessness that a lot of people have, that's self-induced. Like, maybe you're working a job that's crappy, and you don't know how to get out. And a lot of people are just afraid. because you don't know what we're going off into the abysses. That's like I said, the hero's journey that we started out with. The psychedelic trip makes you go on that journey. And I wouldn't suggest it to anybody that isn't ready for it. It isn't ready for a challenge, but it is very hard. And I think something that a lot of people think about psychedelics too is that it won't be hard. That is going to be an easy trip. Like the whole point behind it is it's very hard in the middle of it. But then you come out on the other side, you're like, dude, I went through the whole myriad of emotions and I'm fine. You know what I mean? Because it does feel like you're almost emotionally dying. And maybe you are. Maybe you are. Maybe there's a part of your mind that's like, I'm killing off this fear that you had by making you really explore something you didn't want to explore ever before. And I don't know. I just personally think that there's a lot of things that we don't deal with personally. And then a lot of people are taking control of that, especially within woke culture. I see that a lot with whatever portion of woke culture you see a lot of pain. You see, if you're looking at the trans right activists, you're looking at somebody that what I've noticed a lot of is a lot of rejection. And they're like, now you've rejected me, I reject you, and I tell you exactly why I reject you. That's why a lot of what I've noticed a lot in the trans community is a lot of anger over dating, a lot of anger over lack of suicide prevention methods. But it's one of those things where it's like, well, you're so angry at this time. And the people that are most vocal, and I'm not saying everybody, because there's wonderful commentators out there like Blair White that have a good head on their shoulders and you can have a completely respectable conversation with them. And then there's other people that they're like, look, my whole point behind being in this, like a Jessica Yaniv, for instance, is to show you how angry I am. And it's to show you.
I haven't heard of her.
She's actually Canadian. She actually had a couple of I'm just saying she out of sheer respect for the trans community, because this person looks nothing like a woman. But was just doing a lot of odd actions, had a waxing facility or a spa of some sort that was primarily going to service women shut down due to the fact that it was like, yeah, you're not treating me as a trans woman. But this person also.
Oh, I did hear about her actually. I just didn't remember her name. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about it is people like that are going to come around anyway, because we've allowed them to, because we've as a society, and I'll even say I've played a part in this too, because there is a victim mentality narrative that it's juicy. And I'll be honest, I'm a black guy and I can understand that that's juicy. I would love to just sit there and go like, look, man, the reason why I'm not a millionaire, baby, racism, this black thing, man. If I didn't have that hold me down, I would be out here ruling the world. But sorry, the black thing is just, and people, that's juicy, that's delicious. The problem is when you take that and you make it woke, you're like, I don't have this. Now these are the things you need to do. And even then, it's not necessarily it's become this non-specific thing. I feel very bad for white men now, because it's like I don't know why people hate you guys so much.
Yeah,
but they really like everything.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Everything that's gone wrong. Like me even as a black dude, I'm like, look, man, I know it's bad, but come on, man. Like the dude was just walking down the street, and especially young white dudes, I was like, young white guys are the coolest, man. Like they really are racist. They're really trying to make up for some shit, man, that they didn't even do. And the world is just really not nice to you guys, man. They just aren't. And I'm sure that it's going to come back around and it'll be all right again. But damn, man, this just
I told you, right, about my my family member who is like full woke, and I invited him because I wanted to explore his perspective more. I invited him to do a podcast episode with me and also Dusty, who and another guy from Mixed Mental Arts, Sean McCoy, about police brutality and racism and issues like that, particularly because Dusty is black and lives in Washington, D.C., where some of the protests have happened. And this family member refused to have this conversation because there were too many white people involved, and white people should not be sharing our feelings about experiences that white people don't have, which isn't even true because white people have those experiences too, but way less than black people.
I don't even know if it's what, honestly, man, I don't even know if that's a real thing, because the thing is people are people. It's kind of what I loved about the book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals.
Oh, it's a great book.
It was a great book because it broke it down where it's like, look, man, if you really look at it, if you are within a Western culture and you're speaking English, you basically can probably relate to basically everybody else is with you. It's not like because I'm in America and you're in Canada, we're sitting up here going like, yo, man, there's no way I can understand any of what you're talking about at all. That's like,
what's your life, man? Like, man, your skin color is different from me. We must have completely different lives.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, man, like I'm riding a horse and buggy and you're riding in this car and everything crazy shit. Like, it's not like that. And that's what I don't get. I get that there are some people that are like that, but the thing is like a goodwill conversation, no matter what color somebody is, you can understand where it's coming from. The problem is that we're losing our barometer now with wokeness of what a goodwill conversation is, because there's some people that will have goodwill, like James Damore. That was the perfect example. When you have somebody that is even kind of understand that they might have a few, I guess I found that to be most egregious, because a lot of the woke culture is like mental health. He had Asperger's, he was expressing himself in the best, most concise way that he could. And he even tried to, for somebody that has Asperger's, that was very, very, very considerate of people's feelings. It was incredibly considerate of people's feelings, considering. And he got crucified. They're like, he's a white male that just wants to do white supremacy. And I was like, yo, man, I didn't see anything. It would have been different if he had for 5 times had or like for 1,000 times in this letter had just like went like nigga, and then like that was like that. If that was it, then I would have been like, yeah, there's like, you can't think anything else of that. But that wasn't the way it was. The way it was a bunch of people needing a scapegoat to put all of their anger and all of their own inadequacies on. And that's what it seems like wokeness has become. It's like, if I feel like I'm inadequate, I can now put all of my inadequacies on you, and now you deal with them. And it's like, and even if somebody does step up and goes, hey, I know you've got inadequacies, I'll take advantage of that. They'll be like, what can I do? They're like, I don't know what you can do, but I know that you're not doing enough. And that's a hard spot to be in. I can't understand why somebody would sit there and ask that and go, or just berate somebody into a point of going like, all right, now you've been berated enough that I think that you'll do something. And then it ends up being something bad. Like the big thing here is defund the police, right? And I don't know if you've heard about the Chaz thing. Do you know what I'm talking about, Chaz? Yeah. So you have an autonomous zone, whatever that means. I didn't even know about an autonomous zone until it happened. So you have an autonomous zone where it's supposed to be a result of, this is how good life will be when there's no police. And you have nothing but black youths that are killed within that place. So I'm like, man, I don't fall for any banana in the tailpipe kind of bullshit. And that's what this feels like. It feels like it's like somebody going like, haha, gotcha. Remember how we said all those Black Lives Matter things? Well, sorry. We got rid of all the police, and now the very population that we said was going to be protected when you're gone is the most susceptible now. And it bothers me, the fact that it was short-sighted, and the fact that people don't really know what their enemies are, and that you can take somebody that just sits there and yells forever about whatever, and then you just go, well, they're yelling, it has to be for some reason.
Yeah.
And then when you start asking questions, people go, well, what's that reason? And then they like, I don't even know. And maybe, like I said, if we maybe induced a psychedelic trip, they might go like, oh, that's because I've got some inadequacy issues and I just really needed some attention right now. I should just go and do something else. but the level of introspection is just not there. It's the exact opposite of what Jordan Peterson said. People not willing to clean their room. They're willing to change the world before they ever think about cleaning their room.
And blame everyone for their room not being clean. Like, I can't clean my room. I'm just so oppressed. The oppression makes me incapable of cleaning my room.
Well, that's the thing, man. It's like when I see, and like one thing that I started getting upset with like just a lot of the woke culture was just it would be like, I'm tired. Like that became like a theme. It's like, I'm tired of having to explain. I was like, who asked you? I was like, I've walked around all day and nobody's asked me anything about like, yo, man, Parker, yo, you specifically, racism, what's going on with it? What do you specifically? Like, if that's like the kind of conversation that you're having, then it's a whack conversation. You can always just walk away. Like, why? But nobody takes that in to consideration. They just kind of go along and they feel their feelings, and now it's okay to like feel inadequate. As a matter of fact, you're entitled to feel inadequate, unless, like I said, you're a white guy. Then this like, there's no. And then I understand why the trans thing happens, because when the very thing that you're persecuted for, or the very thing that you are, is the one thing that you're persecuted for, I mean, why wouldn't you try to go through something? I mean, before, I knew a bunch of black people that were like, well, it would just be easier if I was white, and I wish I could bleach my skin. And this, you always want to change you always want to change for whatever is the du jour of the time. Like, I noticed a lot of the trans thing like escalated a lot after Caitlyn Jenner came out, and like that was the very first celebrity. Well, it wasn't no, because they had Chaz Bono, but Chaz Bono, nobody cared about Chaz Bono. It was people like Cher ain't saying shit in years. Nobody cares about you, Chaz. So then they had Caitlyn Jenner, and it was like, yo, this let it know that this, like, if you are a dude, the way you can get out of, if you are a white dude, the way you can get out of being the oppressor is by, if you want to go through the surgery, if you want to take it, you can be back at the top of the food chain if you just do this.
You don't even have to get the surgery. You could just say, I'm a woman now.
Oh yeah. Well, that's big. That's big. And especially in Canada, I don't know. I've just seen the news reports. You could tell me if it's different, but I hear, it's wild.
You should have been. Oh, you should have seen my. I went back to school last semester, and one of my classes was sociology, which I started referring to as social justice indoctrination class. Like, every class was, okay, today we're going to talk about racism, oppression, colonialism, feminism, and all those other keywords. Oh yeah, non-gender binary people and all that kind of stuff.
Well, Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, they had come out with those. Yeah. They had talked about a lot of the woke culture being a way to make it scholarly, make your anger scholarly. Because if you want to, you can put a bunch of, I mean, I've read a few of these papers, if that's what you want to call them.
I read one on white fragility. I want to read that book to see how crazy it is.
Well, it's white fragility, and it's basically people that are pontificating on different ways in which they can be either pissed off if you're a minority. So if you're a minority, the big thing is to be pissed off. And if you're non-minority, your big thing is to point out all the ways that your class is privileged and the different ways that you need to step down off your pedestal and allow other people. And I'm like, pedestal for what? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
it's like Michael Malice calls it the original sin. Like, my white privilege is my original sin. Like, I see the woke people falling on their swords of the original sin of white fragility all the time.
Oh yeah, like the thing I hate about white fragility is they'll go, well, things are just so good for me, and it's almost like this. it's the soft racism of low expectation, because it starts becoming this whole thing where I'm like, look, man, I don't really need you to do a lot of shit for me. He's like, but no, your life is really bad. It's like, is it? Because I'm like, I'm just buying groceries, man. You ain't gotta do all this shit for me. Like, you really don't. And I don't know why a lot of people want to feed into that, because I believe the spirit of our country has changed a little bit. Or not just our country, just Western culture in general has changed. There used to be a tenacity. There used to be a ruggedness about it where it's like, I mean, we came up with the phrase "sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," because we're like, look, we don't give a shit what you say. It's when you start doing shit that we care about it. Now it's like, no, even if you say it, that's bad. And that's Orwellian.
It is.
It's Orwellian. It's what
the language police.
Oh yeah, like once you start ruling over what people can and can't say, and you start making what I thought was the worst was it's like North Korea, right? The big thing about North Korea is you don't really talk about the grand leader, not because he's so great, but because your own homies will turn you in. And woke culture has done that. To get more status is to turn in somebody and go, look, I found the number one perpetrator of white privilege, the number one perpetrator of misogyny, the number one perpetrator of racism, the number one perpetrator. And you can always make that declaration. All you have to do is just have the longest finger pointed the hardest, and then have maybe like one tweet that came like from, at this point in time, it used to be within like 5 years, but like, it's
any point from birth
now. It can be like, when I found out that there was like who was it? Was Adam Savage, the dude off of Mythbusters, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, did you hear about what happened with him? Like, he got a rape beef with his sister. Like,
really?
she was like, he was 7 years old when he did it. So I'm gonna show
like, wow.
And like everybody else was like, yo, like, I know that you're talking, like, did he, like, even if he did do, like, I'm not saying that this didn't happen, but if he did do this, right? And then like even the family goes like, look, man, this bitch is crazy. She was like the LaToya Jackson of this whole thing. Like, nobody listened to LaToya. Nobody listened to this, whatever the Savage was, didn't listen to her. And it blew up into this whole thing, and he almost got canceled. And people were like, finally went like, yo, man, that don't make no sense. Wait a second. So you're trying to say that like you got molested by him when he was 7? Like, you were like, what? And then people were like, well, is that even molesting? And then after a while, like, it was big news, and then everybody was like, this is retarded. It dropped. That's what's gonna happen one day. Because it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. There's too many people that are losing too many friends. There's too many people that are not opening up their mind to the fact that there's a bigger thing going on out here. Like, if you go with defund the police, it's like, all right, so if you have no police, are you trying to say that that's going to make things safer? And if you don't have police, like, what are you replacing that with? Because like, we have two big gangs here, the Crips and the Bloods, right? Those both started off as neighborhood watches, okay?
Really?
That devolved into, that's what happens when you don't have any regulation, but people forget about shit because it's like, that's so long ago. But it's not.
Yeah.
It's really not. It's like within my lifetime, well, not within my lifetime, but within the lifetime of at least my father, the Crips came and became one of the biggest global gangs ever. The same thing with the Bloods. And that was all based off of the fact that, people were like, we're tired of these police coming in and fucking up our neighborhoods. We've got to protect our own neighborhood. But there's no accountability. So when they want to go rogue and they want to start selling drugs, they want to start doing shit to mess up your community, then it's like, you're like, well, who are we going to call to police the quote unquote police?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think like the confusing, the hard thing with that defund the police thing too is that like with Black Lives Matter, people mean different things by it. Like, some people literally mean abolish the police by defund the police, And then some people, when you get them to actually unpack what they're talking about, some of it makes sense. Like some people are talking about things like ending the drug war, which makes a hell of a lot of sense to me, because I think it was a totally bad idea from the start, and it's only caused problems. And then another thing that I think I've heard suggested is like if you have people on the streets with mental disabilities like schizophrenia, or they're bipolar or anything like that, maybe it's a better idea to have someone like a social worker deal with those types of people than like men with guns. But if you like defund the police, that's sort of like the opposite of like it's more like, I think more like reallocating funds of the police is a better idea rather than like defunding, because there's some police that need more funding. Like I forget who I heard talking about this, but like I think apparently one of the reasons that police often go into poor high crime areas is they don't have a high budget, so they have to make easy arrests so they can easily meet their quotas. So they go and they arrest poor people in high crime areas, and then like you wonder why that happens, and it's like an endless cycle. Like it's going for easy wins instead of trying to solve the real problems of murders and stuff like that. And if they had more money, maybe they could go with solving the more important crimes rather than like busting people for having some weed or something like that.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. I think that the reason why money is allocated the way that it is with police is because we as taxpayers, we want maximum productivity, but we don't necessarily want to pay maximum price, if that makes sense. It's kind of like when people go, why are these schools so crappy? And it ultimately comes down to like the taxpayers and like what they're spending their money on. And I think the same thing goes with the cops, because the thing is being a police officer, people disrespect that. But I will tell you this, it's got to be a hard job. Number one thing, and like people go, well, why do they see black faces? Like, it's not just black faces. It's like nobody calls the police and goes like, yeah, man, I just called 911 just to be like, man, I don't even have an emergency, just to let you know that shit's cool and I just really appreciate you guys. Nobody calls like that. Imagine a job where literally everybody that calls you, you know for a fact they're having one of the worst days of their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Think about it. And a lot of
people putting all, it's like putting all black people into the same racial category, or all white people, or all people of any race. Like if you put all cops into the same category, like all cops are bad, that's just stupid. I think it's my second cousin's either fiance or husband. I've met him a few times before, and the last time I met him, he was training to become a cop, and he's like the best type of person to be a cop. He clearly like really cares about people, and he had already done like some volunteer work in low-income communities and trying to help get homeless people off the streets and all kinds of stuff like that. So that kind of guy is a perfect kind of guy to be cops. And there are cops who are like that, who are actually in it to try to help people.
Well, that's something that I think maybe could be implemented too. Like maybe have minimum community service hours with whatever area you're patrolling, because a big part about patrolling is, and a big part about police officers is we forget that they're also members of the community. So like sometimes when they get emotional about their job, they're getting emotional about what they feel this person, whether guilty or innocent, might be representing, bringing into their community too. Even though that's not necessarily the best way to deal with it, there has to be some level of understanding, because when there's an awful action, sure, everybody's going to sit there and go, that was awful, that's awful, that's awful. But you have to think what was on that person's mind. Why could they have possibly done this awful action? And maybe it was for a good reason, maybe it was for a bad reason. We don't know. Maybe it was out of fear, maybe it was out of hatred, whatever. But you can't just say, I know for a fact that everything was hatred, or I know that for a fact everything was fear, or because there's this thing that irritates me that I've seen in the media a lot, where they'll go, if you're afraid or if you're scared, then why don't you just get a different job instead of being a cop? You shouldn't be. I was like, what kind of person? Like even war vets, that's why they get PTSD. Like if you see a gun and somebody's pointing it at you and you know that they're about to do something live with it, or you see something that you think may be a gun, and think about the trainings you'd have to see. I saw this horrific, it was like a Vietnam vet, right? It was a Vietnam vet that like shot down this cop on this police camera on a dash cam. And I saw that and I was like, yo, I know they show that in police training, but that was like how fast it escalated. It was crazy. And having that be somebody's reality all the time, like I have a serious respect for it. And I don't know why so many people don't get that, or they think that it's easier than that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like like I've never had any interest in becoming a cop because it sounds like fucking awful. Like I don't want to have all those kinds of challenges. Like you were saying, like people treating you like shit all the day, assuming you're there to antagonize them. And it's like, it's so hard to do the right thing. They're probably, like we were talking about earlier, there are incentives to bust people for kind of like bullshit crimes, and doing the harder work is really hard to do, obviously. And I mean, like you were saying too, when cops do terrible things, it's like people rarely look at the underlying reasons, like what was happening in their mind and what happened in their life that contributed to them thinking that this was a good response to what's happening.
Yeah, and the thing that I don't get is a lot of people are arrogant enough to think they wouldn't make the same call. Because I've never been given the business by anybody like on the streets or something like that. Like if somebody was over me and was beating my ass or something like that as a cop, and I've seen people that were like, yeah, you know, like you should have shot him, like he was getting his ass kicked. I was like, look, how long do you have to get? If I want to go home and see my wife and my kids, and my day didn't consist of getting my ass kicked by some random person, yeah, I might shoot. Like, you know what I'm saying? I might shoot him. Or, you know, if I was just like, yo, it's a long day and like a chokehold on somebody, it's like, look, man, it just makes it easier. And you don't know how many people that person took down that day. And this is all that I know is that everybody has their fuse. Some of it's shorter than others. But especially with a job like being a police officer, it all depends on where you work. Like I live in Denver. They're very well paid here. They've got quite a few cops here, and you don't really hear about a lot of issues. I mean, still issues happen, of course, but it's not as bad as other places. And like I said, it varies by where you're at. Like I hear in Chicago, it's live because they just don't have enough people. And the cops they do have, they're like, we don't really want you to do your job like that because it's really, really liberal like that. So
yeah, it's really like you said, maybe if people if people who are saying defund the police got together with some cops and did mushrooms together, just like if people in different political ideologies got together and did mushrooms together. If you get together and do mushrooms with someone, you're not going to be mad at them about anything.
No, I mean, it all depends. It really depends. It depends on what was on their mind or why they have their political belief. Because sometimes it's so deep rooted, and it's like, you know, you start finding out is like, you know, if you go deep enough, you're like, oh man, the reason why I don't like Republicans is like, you know, somebody beat me in a Ronald Reagan mask when I was like 3 at a birthday party, and I just really realized that. And you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. You know, like you can't stop somebody. Like, why would somebody in a Ronald Reagan mask come up and beat you with a baseball bat? I mean, you were set up to fail, man.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like there that happens all the time too. Like you were saying, I'm sure that's often the case. Like, I don't know. Sometimes it's like some of that is obviously like your upbringing too. Like a lot of people, like you were saying, people live unexamined lives and they're not that introspective a lot of the time. So like you kind of copy the political and or religious beliefs that you were raised with, and then maybe you do analyze them and you change them, and maybe you go like more radical than your parents were. Maybe you're like, maybe you go off in the completely opposite reaction or direction as a reaction to it. And it's like that's interesting too. Like I see often people have like this extreme ideology and then they realize, holy shit, I was all wrong, and then they shift to this other extreme ideology, which is really interesting. Like the more I kind of like think about my worldviews and learn and examine different perspectives on different issues, it's so often the case that I think, wow, this person makes so much sense about all of these different issues. And then on the like these few specific issues, I think I can't totally get on board with everything they're saying, though. I kind of disagree with some of the things. And then that ends up being the case with like every person. And then I just have to remind myself all the time, like, there's never going to be anyone who you agree with about absolutely everything. And expecting that is just ridiculous.
And then why would you, my thing is why would you want that? Why would you want somebody to completely agree? Like the whole purpose of talking to somebody is to expand. Like if you have somebody that just echoes the exact same thing that you do, like what is the interest in life like that? Or why should everybody think the way that you do? Like what makes your thinking so great? I still don't understand how anybody could honestly think that their opinion is tantalizing, because like maybe it's just me. Like even my opinions, I'm like, that's good, but I don't know if I'm like married to them like that. Like they're always bound to change. So I don't know anybody that could sit there and be absolutely happy with the fact that they're imposing their will and they're imposing their view on somebody else, and that their will is the absolute right will of all things. And that's what wokeness really does kind of give you. And once again, I think there's no real woke leaders anymore. There's like wokeness is just this big, weird, globular kind of thing that just has a lot of people. But mostly, I think of all the people that I think need to take psychedelics, it's those Antifa fuckers, man. Those black bloc wearing psychedelics, they need to take it the worst. I'm like sitting there going like, dude, don't come in like black bloc kind of like all of this gear and looking like you're trying to be a badass, but you look like you don't work out like ever.
Yeah.
And like you're like mad and you're like thinking that, and you know what upsets me the most about Antifa? They say that they're going for my rights. I'm minority. They're like, hey, we're going for the rights of black life. I was like, look, I've never asked you to do shit for me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that none of the black community went like, yo, man, you know those like weird looking suckers that are like wearing all black all the time with masks over their face and everything. We really need them to go out and like start name. We need that. Like I've never heard any of my homies come up and tell me about that. Nobody's like saying, we're like, yo, man, those Antifa dudes, they're out here just killing the game. Like most of them are like, yo, why are you here?
Yeah. I've never even encountered a black person that talks to me as a white person and says sometimes they'll tell me about hard times they've had for sure, which makes sense. But I've never had any black person say, I want you to fight for my racial issues. And I've certainly never heard any black person say, I want you to put on a mask and go get violent with people for racial justice.
Well, no, like I've gone to the meetings, man. We don't say that shit ever. No, none of us. I was talking about homie Jim. He was like, no, man, I don't even know who the fuck that dude was. But no, it's that's just the thing now, and I've noticed that either if you don't, the big things that I've noticed now is that to signify that you are a quote unquote ally, there's usually like some polyamorous kind of like weird things going on. Like I'll do like this one person, and then like I'll bring another person into that whole thing. That's usually one of them. And then they're really big on telling me about how like woke they are and how they're aware of my struggle. Another another way of seeing somebody that's woke is like any like I've seen more Black Lives Matter nearly on like white people than I ever have on any black.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Like no man, like yo man, I still don't have. I don't have any Black Lives Matter or anything, but I like know so many like white girls that have mad Black Lives Matter paraphernalia. Like, and then they'll just like extra stunt on social media. They'll be like, "Look, I care," and then like it's they have like they're the mission chick girls that are like the mission trip girls. They're like, you know, they'll have like a picture with like a bunch of like African kids in like a village. They're like smiling. They're like fly in their eyes and shit like that. And then they're like, sitting up there going like, with the two kids just going like, yo, see, I saved them. And, you know, for a fact, like off that photo album, they're like, yeah, get these fucking kids off me. I just did this shit for the grams.
Yeah, it's funny too. Like it reminds me like what you were saying earlier about how like people take advantage of this. And this is one thing that I've found interesting learning about more lately, about how corporations are like capitalizing on the wokeness with Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all that shit, and are like getting people, they're like tricking woke people into supporting corporations. They're tricking them into like paying money for them. Like, hey, we're woke, so buy our shit, bro.
Well, this is what I found to be most egregious. Peloton. Okay, Peloton is so expensive. Peloton has a Black Lives Matter ride. Who the fuck was that for?
Yeah, good point.
Who was that? Like you. I told you I go to the meetings, man. None of us got a Peloton.
How isn't it like a $2,000 bike, or like a even more expensive, like 7,000 or something, and you have to pay like a huge yearly fee or some shit?
The only reason that I even knew about this ride, right? Not because I own a Peloton. It came on an Amazon television. They were like, yo, we got Peloton as an app. And then like I was like looking through and I was scrolling. I usually use it for yoga. And I was like, wait a second, if you get the stationary bike shit. And then they had a Black Lives Matter ride. I was like, you sons of bitches. Who was that even for?
Yeah. It's so like upper class woke black people who are probably some of the only black people who agree with the upper class woke white people about wokeness can buy bikes and feel good about themselves. Or maybe it's even probably more likely so that the woke upper class white people can ride those bikes and feel like they're doing something for racial justice. I bet that's more likely.
Oh yeah. Well, like that's the only reason that I could be like, you know, I could just imagine. I can imagine some Karen just like on her stationary bike going like, oh, you know, I couldn't go to any of the protests because, you know, I don't want to get sick or nothing like that. But look, I'm supporting. I did your shitty Peloton ride that I was going to do anyway.
I'm fighting for racial justice. Pedal harder.
I don't know, man. And then they like, it's a strange time, man. It's a strange time because like then you got Colin Kaepernick. Like I knew it was strange when Colin Kaepernick got an endorsement deal. I was like, yo, man, this dude, when's the last time that dude even threw a football? and this dude's getting like endorsement deals just based off of the fact that he politicized something that not even Nike, because Nike on their own, if Nike cared to, they'd be like, yo, we have Nike money. We're gonna end racism. It's like, look, like if they cared to do that, they could, but they don't care about it. They're like so many people get taken on the ride that they forget about the fact that this is still like, it's still bullshit. Like you get taken along for the ride of thinking that you're doing something nice. It's kind of like when people want to protest a lot. I used to go to protests, but then it's like, what are you protesting? And like at the end of this, like, is there going to be a policy that you're behind? Like, is there going to be some? Instead, now it's become just an event to go and look and get with other people and have like what I like to call woke synthesis. And it's like, look, if we have enough numbers, if we have just enough people to get together, it looks like our cause is really big. But this is something about America that nobody really thinks about. We, as far as just North America, have 350 million people within this country, right? If 1 million people show up to a rally, that seems like that's a lot. But that's less than a fucking percentage of the people that are in the country. It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. But in wokeness, like I've been on other podcasts too, and one of the podcasts was a very woke one. And one of the big things that they had about wokeness was if I have more numbers, that adds validity to my argument, even if my argument is bad. Yeah. So they do these tactical things to essentially play a rhetorical game and change the landscape. What I don't like about wokeness is they're like, instead of playing your games that I feel you're playing, I believe what I need to do is play the game that I want to play and change the language so I run it. And there's all these underlying things that you just don't understand and nobody will ever understand, while they're doing the exact same thing to you in front of your face. And it's like, I didn't think of it this way until I had psychedelics. And I kind of went like, why does it feel so strange when certain people are talking to me about certain subjects that should resonate with me, but I don't feel like it's coming from a genuine place. And that's what put my mind directly on it. I was like, okay, you aren't actually trying to solve anything. You just want a power grab right now. And that's why you have it under the guise of I'm a good person, though. And it's a common kind of game to play, but when you see it, it's like it's very hard to unsee.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I'm a good person, so I should feel good about having all this power because I am helping people. And like it's funny that people get criticized for this so much with all this cancel culture shit. Like I forget what it was called, but did you hear about that letter recently, like that free speech letter signed by a bunch of intellectuals like Barry Weiss and Steven Pinker, and it was like really controversial. It was just like it was just a letter that a whole bunch of intellectuals and journalists and people like that signed. Mm-hmm. And I think J.K. Rowling was one of them who signed it too, because you hear that Twitter shit with her recently.
Okay. J.K. Rowling lost me for a second.
It's like they send this letter. Yeah.
Well, what I was trying to say was just I was saying J.K. Rowling's lost me for a second.
What'd you say?
Oh, is this connection messing up? It might be. But I said J.K. Rowling's, she lost me for a second.
Yeah.
Are you actually hearing me? Because it seems like there's a little bit of a delay.
Why? Can you still hear me?
No, I can hear you, but it's a little off. That's all. But it's okay. Like I said, J.K. Rowling's, she lost me for a second due to the fact that she had like kind of gone a little bit too far into the wokeness. But then,
Mom, would you mind stopping that? I think you're.
What's up?
Sorry. It's fine.
Okay. I didn't know if there was something that I was doing, if there was somebody in the room with you.
No. Sorry, go ahead.
No, okay. So J.K. Rowling's, sorry about that. It was a little weird. But J.K. Rowling's had kind of gone over to the woke side and she'd gone a little feministy. But then she started saying the whole thing about the trans thing. And then that impressed me. But then Stephen King, who was my other favorite author, he kind of folded, and he was originally defending J.K. Rowling's about her talk about, trans women aren't really women kind of thing. And then he was like, trans women are women. And then when he doubled down, I was like, yo, man, this is powerful when you've got people that like, because Stephen King, he has to at this point in time have fuck you money, and he still doesn't say fuck you. He's like, yo, man. Like when I saw that, I was like, how powerful can this possibly be, where this dude that has been a staple within entertainment in both film and also writing. And I mean, like, those are two mediums that are very hard to make it in, but he's done it for decades, and he's made money for decades. And it's gotten so powerful that he's like, yo, I don't want to deal with the shit, man. Like, fine then, fucking trans women or women, like, just get off my back. Just fucking stop. And that's the way that it's coming off now. It's coming off as anybody that acquiesces doesn't come from a place of, this is what I truly believe. It's like one of those things where they're smiling like this and they got a gun to their head and they're like, yeah, man, I believe in, I really do believe in that trans stuff, man. And when you get that feeling, and I think everybody's starting to get that feeling now, it's time for a break. And I don't know when that break is going to come, and I don't know what that break's going to be. But I think that the liveness of, the active shooters that were going on, that was one of them. I think the protest is another example of just how mad people are and not really knowing what to do. And I think collectively we've got a lot of people that are feeding into this anger, going like, I think if I feed into this anger, then eventually this is going to go away, not knowing that it's a very divisive thing and is very subtle. And I dislike the fact that it's being exposed on such a global level, because you already had Russian hackers. We already had all kinds of other people that were trying to sow division. And now we're just showing, hey, if you sow division, that's a winning strategy here. Yeah. All you have to do is just get a little bit. You don't even have to necessarily be here. But I believe that just the war of information is another war that we're losing quite a bit. And that's going to essentially be our downfall, because we've gotten to a point now where everybody was like, this is fake news and you should vet all of your stories, to I'm so mad, I'm willing to once again believe whatever shitty story there is out there, because I know that I'm going to be mad about it.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying there too, sowing division between people is the name of the game. Like we were talking about earlier, the very tactics that Hitler used: sow division between people, unite everyone against a common enemy.
Yeah, and the enemy is at this point in time, what I don't like is the fact that they made the enemy be the world or anybody that's not in your group. And I don't know when it's going to come around, but I think the left is either one of two things are going to happen. Either people are going to continue to acquiesce, or the left is going to implode. But I think it's just going to implode, because now people are starting to like attack their own people. Like when Al Franken got taken down, I was pretty sure that was not a good side of things to come for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, like you said earlier, like people, even woke people are getting canceled because they can get canceled for anything they did at any point of their life. So it's like wokeness. You might be right about that, because wokeness is almost like eating itself from the inside out in a way. Like, people get canceled and then they realize, holy shit, I was in this ideology, and then they like join the group of people who have left wokeness because they were rejected by the thing that they supported.
Yeah, and you're going to probably see a lot more of that, because the big game that's being played is shame. They love to shame people. They love to go, you should be ashamed of your... And it's a very, well, for lack of a better word, it's a bitchy kind of strategy to use. And it's gotten to a point now where, like, they've become the nagging wife of the nation. No, like seriously, it's like think about what you think about a typical nagging wife. Not to say that there's anything like, you know, wrong with like women, but like the nagging, particularly the archetype of nagging wife is it's like you never do enough.
Yep.
It's like there's always more to nag about.
Yep.
So they become basically the nagging wife that everybody, and like the same thing. It's like we've learned this tactic of happy wife, happy life. So it's like if you just keep on acquiescing into these people, you eventually think that they'll stop asking for things. But I've been bullied before, okay?
Me too.
And I know how bullying works. A bully doesn't sit there and go, "Oh gosh, you just gave me the $20 today and I don't need any more money. I'm sorry I had to bully you." They go, "No, you gave me $20 today. You're such a punk. I'm getting $40 tomorrow, okay?"
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
You have to. That's why they say, you know, like the United States, we don't negotiate with terrorists unless you're Obama. But like I said, we don't negotiate with terrorists because when you start doing things like that, it like starts like poking a hole in the integrity of what you stand for, and people start knowing that they can punk you.
Yep.
That's what's happening right now with wokeness. Wokeness is, and this is what I think that's why I really hate it. It's a punk test for the nation, and we're failing it.
Yep.
Both Canada and, well, not even just Canada, all of Western society. If you take Germany, if you take England, if you take United States, if you take Canada, if you could take any Western culture situation, and you'll see that they're under the same exact thing. Like wokeness is becoming the nagging wife that's like you never do enough. And now instead of going, "Hey, shut the fuck up," people are going, "Hey,
yeah.
we really need to like just keep on feeding into this." And somebody, I don't know who it's going to be, but it's getting to a point now, and I think it's probably going to be within the millennial generation or something, but there has to be somebody that finally goes like, "Hey, if the Democratic Party wants to be saved, it has to be I'm a Democrat and I'm going to be the first one to tell these people to shut the fuck up." But that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is it's going to go on for a little while longer, and I see the landscape, and maybe for another, I don't know, man. I want to say 4 to 8 years, but I don't know, man. It's that wokeness. It's juicy, man. It's a juicy apple to bite into.
Yeah.
It does feel good. It's nice. Like honestly, just Andrew, I wish you could just be black for a day, just to know what it's like. Just going, is he because I'm black? And just see the power and like the drain of like energy from the person's face. Go like, "Oh no, is it gonna be?" And it's like, and I don't ever like pull that trigger, but I'm like, "No, I'm just fuck with you, man." But just seeing like the level of fear.
Wow.
Like when you can just see it, especially if it's somebody that's like at a high level at a job. Like if you start like going to your boss and goes like, "What do you mean by that?" He starts going like, "Oh shit." Oh, immediately they're going like, "Oh man, oh."
It's like you're in a group with your coworkers or something at lunch, and later on your boss says, "You know, you people were saying this earlier," and you're like, "You people."
That's right. No, it's like it's juicy. It's delicious. I honestly wish that most of my white male friends, I want you to be black for a day just to know how juicy it is to just do this shit, just be able to like say things. And then like it's amazing, man. Seriously. The only group you really can't talk about, because even Nick Cannon almost lost the shit for this, is you cannot go after Jewish people. That's the only thing as a black person you can't. Like everybody else is like, yeah, you're free game, because that's like about food chain. They'll be like, "Hey man, they were biblical. Even the Bible talks about how they got messed up. You can't fucking talk about them." I'm like, all right, fine then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Like they've been like legitimately oppressed for like time immemorial.
Well, the thing that I never understood about Jewish people getting persecuted was like Jews were God's chosen people.
Yeah.
So if you're a Christian, you should. But then they're like, the thing about it is they're like, well, they're the enemy because they killed Jesus. And I'm like, well, he was the king of those people. Like, how can you kill how can you hate the people that he was king of?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I think it was mostly Romans who killed Jesus.
Well, Romans did it, but let's put it this way. There weren't a lot of Jews that had a problem with that.
Yeah.
It's not like, I mean, you've seen the movie.
Everyone betrayed him in the story, obviously, right? Well, not everyone.
Not everybody.
Almost everyone. Yeah.
It was Judas. Well, no, like this is the story of Jesus is like this, okay? And this is the sad part about that story. It's kind of a story of perfectionism. It's like, look, man, you can be a good ass motherfucker and they will still. As a matter of fact, the better you are, the more likely it is they probably will. And that hasn't changed, man. Anybody that was good on this earth that tried to bring people together, you got offed.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
that's so true.
Like, I don't even want to run down the whole list. Like, Patrice O'Neal had a great line when he was like, when Malcolm X was going around, you white devils, blue-eyed evil, he was living a wonderful life, right? As soon as he started saying, everybody's my brother, that was it. That was the last you heard of him. He was like, yo, man, everybody's my brother.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I don't know, man. I don't know what the solution is, but I don't think the wokeness is going to stop anytime soon. It's too delicious. It's too delicious. It's kind of like.
It's like like you were saying before, like the goal is not even to actually end anything. Like you were talking about Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay before. They've talked about, and I've talked a little bit to James Lindsay actually, because he was on one of the episodes of Mixed Mental Arts when we were talking about James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian's new book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. We were talking about the wokeness a little bit, and see, obviously they've studied this in detail, and like the goal is not even to end racism and oppression. It's like for white people to always be apologizing for racism, and it's committing something like committing to an endless struggle to fight against this thing that can never be beat. It's like, it reminds me of how it's like a religion, because it's a replacement for enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. And it's become this, and the more enlightened or the more woke you are, and the more that you display this, the more like respect you get. And when you have respect of oppression or recognition of oppression, I can't get behind it. It's almost like a lazy kind of loser-esque way of conducting yourself, if you ask me. Because you can always find different ways that other people are flawing and failing you if you want to look for them. Like, the big test is to go like, look, people make mistakes, but I'm willing to go above that, and I believe in more connection. Unfortunately, we just ain't there, man. We're not there as far as just having goodwill towards our fellow man, and just having goodwill towards other people. And I think that culturally it's changed. I don't know when the whole thing changed with not trusting just even your next door neighbor, because like I remember growing up and I would watch television and you would see like something like Home Improvement. He had such a good relationship with his neighbor that he would talk to the dude behind the fence, and you could never see his face, but it was like, could never see his face, but you knew that was Tim's best friend.
Yeah.
And I could recall in my life that there were other people that had that kind of relationship too. The thing that kills me now is the fact that not only is that not desired, but it's almost like angrily fought against. And the only thing that can basically save us and save Western culture and save a lot of what we hold valuable, no matter who you are, is to basically get over this and try to find whatever it is that's going to bring us all together. And I don't know what that is, because it's definitely not politics. It's religion might be closer to it, but I don't think it's that either. And I don't know. There's some people that it's gotten to a point now where I believe that Republicans have become the party of people that actually just don't want America to fall altogether. And then Democrats are, if you have any problem or you hate America, this is your party.
Yeah.
And when you break that down, like, I don't really like, I can understand hating this country, but I can also understand love. I understand loving it more, but I can understand hating it, because it's like Chris Rock had the best way of putting it. And he was like, yo, if you're black in America, Uncle Sam is like the uncle that paid your way through college, but molested you. You know what I'm saying?
That's a perfect way of putting it.
No, like it just that it is what it is. Like, that's the closest thing. Like, that's the way it is to be a minority, or probably the thing I don't get is like white women when they complain. I'm like, maybe you got something to complain about, but are you just like jumping on this train because like this shit is really, really good to just be offended? I don't know. I just don't. I don't know. I don't know what the struggle is. I'm not going to sit here and take anything away from it, but I just know that that's like the number one person that jumps on the train and like wants to lead the tracks.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of younger white men too. It seems like mostly white people to me, as you were talking about.
Well, and not just white people, rich white people that want to tell
you. Oh yeah.
Like, I've run into more affluent white people that are like, but do you know how bad you have it? I was like, look, man, I don't know what kind of day you're trying to have, but starting off by telling me what I don't have is not going to have, it can't be a good day for you. It can't be.
Yeah.
Like, why would you start your day telling me about what I don't appreciate about I don't know. That's just something that I've noticed these days.
Does it seem like kind of condescending to you when people are not condescending, patronizing to you when people do that?
Yeah, in a way it is, but at the same time, I expect it. I don't. You can't get. The thing is, you can't get mad when you're like, yo, I know what people think about. Like, minority acceptance is cool up to a point, but it's not 100% cool.
Yeah.
So, like I said, minority acceptance is cool up to a point, but it's not 100% cool.
What do you mean?
How can I say it? How could I put this? I'll say that people. I like the fact that people will at least consider the fact that I might have had some issues, but I don't want you to assume that I had a worse experience than you just because of my skin color. Like, I grew up in the suburbs. I didn't really have a lot. I didn't really have a lot of problems like that. I'm not that dude. And then there's also this stereotype that gets thrown on you, like, yeah, you had to have gone through like a lot of stuff growing up in the ghetto. And I was like,
I didn't grow up in the ghetto.
That's right. I'm like, look, man, like I grew up in Colorado Springs, man. That's about as suburb as you can get. And people still kind of like try to tell you about how bad your experience might be. And that's not cool to me. But at the same time, I've noticed that there's more people that are willing to listen to what my experience is too, if that makes sense. So it's like their assumption of my experience is worse, but they're at least willing to kind of listen to my experience after I've corrected them. Where there was just a time where it went unsaid that I probably just had a bad experience just being black, or it was just, or maybe not even like considering my experience. Like, you just kind of go, oh, you're full of crap if you have any complaint. That's something that kind of is a big thing too. But I don't know. That doesn't ruin my day like that.
That kind of seems like a bit of a double-edged sword then. Like, there's a pro but also a con.
I mean, like, I don't know. I guess maybe the con is kind of bigger than the pro, though. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds that way.
I don't like having anybody tell me what my thoughts on my own experience should be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, that's just something that's big to me. But I don't know. Woke culture is something that's ever changing, and I find deeper layers of it. The biggest thing about woke culture, and I'm happy that woke culture hasn't taken this in, but the MAPS thing, the minority, or not minority, but the minor attracted persons.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, like they're trying to like actually be part of the LGBTQ banner, and that's when I'm like,
So it's
and
like
even like,
ugly people?
well, I don't know, man. The LG, I don't know what they're trying to do, but they like want to be strapped on. That's like, look, man, if you just put an LGBTQ plus M, we'll be so happy. And I was like, what? And then they're like, yeah, man, like we really just need people to know that we're out there. And like there's nothing wrong with being attracted to kids. And like even the
those. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the minor attracted people. I don't know, man. That's when the wokeness went a little too far when I'm like,
yeah.
So this has gotten co-opted to the point, and this wokeness basically to me is saying you have a grievance and you want it to be aired in the most official way possible. And when anybody can jump on, like it's like, I'm persecuted too, I'm a pedophile. You know,
yeah,
that's when you
know, air the grievances of pedophiles.
Yeah, but maybe that's going too far when somebody does something like that.
Yeah.
Like when you start accepting so many people that somebody even thinks that they have the right to do that to your movement, maybe you should kind of think about, like I said, what wokeness really is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well said. Yeah. Like I wonder how bad it could possibly get in terms of like the different types of people that could be at least asked to be included in, as Dave Chappelle calls them, the alphabet people.
Oh yeah. And well, that's what I've noticed is if you're not a minority, like naturally, if like your skin color doesn't match, if you're not disabled, if you're not basically, if you're a plane, if anybody looking at you walking down the street would think that you were plain, you have to join something to make you feel better. Like that's why, you know, fat phobia. That's another one of the groups where they're like, look, we are, and wokeness has become kind of like the untouchables of society. If you're one of the untouchables of society and you have a problem with that, then just come on and join us, and then we'll change that for you. And Obama kind of started that with getting people to vote that hadn't voted before, and that was a lot of the constituents that he had pulled in. And plus, it was just the right time, man. A lot of people were ready to have something different besides old white dude in the White House, but you know, we went right back to it. So what can be said?
Yep. Now we're gonna have his old white man for president next time, unless we have the current old white man.
What, you talking about Trudeau?
Oh no, I was talking about Trump, but yeah, Trudeau too.
No, I thought you were talking about Canada, man. I was about to say, I'm like, Trudeau, he's
a young white man.
No, he is. He's, I don't know, what do Canadians think of Trudeau?
I think people seem kind of like as tribal about him as you would probably expect. Like he's pretty clearly a woke prime minister, but like it seems like because of that, people either really love him or they hate him. Like as you would probably expect, like more right wing people think he's awful, and more left wing people tend to think he's great. I personally thought he sounded really good at first, and I like that he legalized weed, but I am disappointed with pretty much everything he did and said other than that, so I didn't vote for him the second time. And obviously he showed that he was a hypocrite when it was revealed that he did blackface like several times.
I don't know, man. Like I said, that's one of those things where these purity tests, bruh, like I can't get behind purity tests. I'm like, man, when you sit up there and you're like, you can never make any mistakes, like ever.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like I'm like some of the best lessons I've had in my life came from making big mistakes.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And to sit there and go, yo, you can't learn anything from, or you should be persecuted for the rest of your life about that. Like I can understand things like, the Karen that was in like the park and like called the cops on the dude. Like I can understand that. That's, should probably have your life ruined because you try to ruin a life. But if you're out there and you just said like if somebody has an off-color joke, like I don't understand why like people are upset by that. Like it's kind of like hate speech, right? Like why can't somebody hate me in speech? Like I love that. I love the fact that there's somebody that actually would take the time to hate me in speech. And now people are like that could hurt you. That could like it could, or maybe I could like no, not be a bitch and just like fucking just take it. Like that's just the way it goes. That's the way it goes. But we've gotten into this whole thing. Dan Crenshaw made this book called Fortitude, and he was saying that basically we've created a culture where as fragile as you can possibly be, that gives you the most benefit out of life. And it's like, what happens when you take that to its absolute extreme? You're essentially making people that are being defeated by just life and circumstances that they can't control. And you're making a lot of very unhappy people. And these people are feeding into their own unhappiness by becoming more unhappy by, finding things to be unhappy about. So I don't know. I can't get down with any of what's going on, just due to the fact that I don't see any kind of positive outcome that could come from it.
Are you familiar with John McWhorter?
I've heard the name, but I haven't. No.
Are you familiar with Glenn Lowry?
Like I said, heard the name, but
okay. Well, they both do this podcast that I often watch, and Glenn Lowry's a pretty famous economist, and John McWhorter is a linguist, and they're both Black, and they talk about racial issues a lot. And I think it's interesting what John McWhorter said. He said like because he was raised as like middle class, and he's like a university professor, and he lives in a high income neighborhood. He says that he's never had that many bad experiences with racism, but when he occasionally does encounter a racist person, he's generally not offended by that, because the way he looks at a person like that is, he said he looks at a person like that as like gum stuck to the bottom of his shoe. It's like, oh, you're annoying, get off, go away. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the thing about racism is a lot of people don't get that it comes from a feeling of being small yourself. And if somebody's feeling small themselves, what can you really say to them? What can you really do to them? They're already miserable. Like, happy people don't go around trying to tear people down. If you're truly happy, like, what would be the use of that? So, I've always thought that conceptually racism was just funny.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
That's just my thought on it. But I mean, it's always going to be around. Just like wokeness is always going to be around. Wherever there's racism, there's going to be wokeness, and both of them come from the same basic spot. It's just, if you put wokeness, it's basically the new reverse racism. They used to say it was reverse racism, but now it's called woke. And it's
Yeah.
and you can say it's woke because it's the reverse of whatever you are. It's like if you're disabled, you can be like, you able-bodied assholes. That's why you're a piece of shit, because you're able-bodied. If you're, black, then it's like, you white people. That's what's holding us back. If you're a woman, then you can just say it's men. If you're whatever, you can just say it's whatever the opposite is of you. And that became the thing. And I mean, people get together for protests all the time now, just to kind of like have what I like to call protest now is like, I guess, offense and offended orgy. That's all it is. Like, we all get together.
It is.
And we all like go, and because have you noticed that now? It could be about one thing, but then all of a sudden it's like, we drag in this issue. Now it's time to drag in this issue. Now it's time to drag in this. So it's like, originally it becomes Black Lives Matter. Then it becomes, like, well, what about the women's right and the women that are hit with something? And then what about the gays and the trans and everything else? Then that all comes in too now, and it all gets concatenated, and nobody really knows what the real issue is when you go to these things anymore. It's kind of like the Women's March. The Women's March, that was the first time I saw people wearing Black Lives Matter stuff, and I was like, but I thought this was the Women's March. Like, are you supposed to be standing up for all of it? Like, what policy are you trying to push through? Is there a policy you're trying to push through?
I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I don't know what they want. All I know is that there's this defund the police thing, and defunding the police. That's, like I said, it's not a good idea. I don't know where they would go with that, but it isn't whatever they're saying it is. That's all that I know. And there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of underlying, undercutty kind of very in the shadows kind of dealings that are going on. And I don't know why, but I do know that a lot of people are feeding into it.
That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, man. Crazy times. It'd be good. It'd be cool if some sort of a solution could be implemented, like the one that you suggested, like everyone taking a psychedelic trip at 21 or something like that. Like, I think not the only, but maybe one possible way to solve it would be like to have people focus more on ideas like love and hope. But I don't know how to like implement that sort of thing either.
Well, there's certain things that we have in school now that school in itself is a learning ground for society, not just intellectually, but also as far as social skills go. So I'm thinking maybe like implementing having like meditation that's as part of gym or something like that, or maybe implementing, having to have like a feelings chart, because a lot of people don't have, like, we have a lot of intellectual intelligence, but a lot of our emotional intelligence is very, very low. And hell, I think that that's a crisis of spirit for the United States. I think that's why not just we as people not getting along, but I think that's why, marriages are dissolving, because a lot of people don't have just a general way of getting along with people, or having the tools to even know that they're not doing the best that they can as far as, communicating, telling people what's up, and making people feel safe too. So
yeah,
I don't know. These are all just thoughts that maybe might go someplace, but I just know that we're kind of, if you ask me, I feel like my psychedelic trip is kind of the same thing that our country needs now. We're having a crisis of existence, and we kind of need to figure out what we really want to do. Is it like a split up kind of thing? Because there's people that are mad enough to, it feels almost like they would go into civil war, but I don't think it's actually going to come to that.
Yeah. People, like, I forget who I heard or saw say this, but it kind of made sense to me. Like, as long as people have like Netflix accounts and can order stuff from Amazon and shit, they're probably not going to like support a revolution. And what you were saying about just like perhaps teaching like teaching mindfulness to students at school or something like that. That made me think about one of my mom's friends who's a teacher. Actually, she got a degree in mindfulness, and she actually has been she started to teach her students how to do mindfulness meditation, basically, which I think is a fucking great idea.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that you at least introduce it to somebody, because I'm not saying that it's going to hit everybody, because there's some people that, like, my dad's one of them. Like, it just doesn't matter. He just doesn't like, he does not like learning about any kind of meditation. He doesn't like mindfulness like that. That's just not his dig. But for the people that do need to use that, like, at least have the tool, because hell, I had to teach myself how to meditate. I didn't have anybody that was like, hey, this is what you got to do. You got to sit down. You got to, like, clear your mind, or not even clear your mind, just focus more on your breath. And it's added a lot. It's added a lot more, just focusing on the breath.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the meditation helps me a lot too. I've been doing it for a long time now, and I guess I was gonna say I kind of taught myself to do it too, but I kind of heard like little tips and tricks from people I've heard talk about it on podcasts, like Tim Ferriss, for example, and Sam Harris, and I just sort of like gradually taught myself to do it, and now it's like a regular practice, like working out or brushing my teeth, and it really, like, it's one of those little things that among all of the things that I do that really helps me emotionally, like you were talking about. And now I don't even do it for as long as I used to, but I find that is probably because I have I have so much practice that I can get into the kind of mental state that I want to more quickly. But I find too that if I don't do it, like if I forget to do it on a day, I'm more likely to be like a little more irritable than I normally am. It really helps with that sort of thing, among many others as well.
Oh yeah. Irritability, just having that conversation with yourself, knowing what's making you mad, knowing what's making you irritated, knowing why you're getting to that point. It's just cathartic, and it really does feel like you're taking care of yourself instead of having to take care of, I don't know, somebody else, what they're doing. And I mean, hell, that's a lot more freeing too.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Yeah, man, I'm not gonna lie though. I think it's about that time, man. I'm starting to slow down a little bit.
I was just thinking that, actually. So yeah, we can end that here for now. I'm glad we had such a great conversation, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, no problem, man. I appreciate it too. We've definitely got to do it again. It was very nice. Had a lot of energy. Like I said, if it was a little earlier, maybe I'd be able to go a little bit longer. But I'm starting to see myself fade a little bit.
Yeah, no problem, man. No problem. Yeah, it was a great conversation. Thanks for talking. So, yeah, I'll say all the stuff I like to say at the end of my episodes here, and then you can give any last words or plugs for social media or anything like that. So, thanks to everyone for watching another episode of the Mindgasms podcast. Hope you found this conversation as interesting as we did. And like I always say, thanks to everyone for subscribing to my channel, pressing the like button on this video, commenting on it, so let us know your thoughts, and share it everywhere. And also, like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And stop caring about wokeness so much. All right. All right. Anything else to say before we end it there?
Wonderful conversation. Hope to do it again. If anybody wants to connect with me, I'm at AfroPsychonaut88 on Instagram. If anybody wants to hit me up, I'll probably be hanging around in the Mixed Mental Arts forum on Facebook. And Yeah, don't bother me on my own personal Facebook because I'll be real. I probably won't hit you back, but
All right.
if you got something to say, you can always message me.
All right. Cool. Thanks, man. All right. Well, adios until next time, everyone.